As journalists and television hosts, scripts are a lifeline. Each newscast, each story, it all revolves around a script.
But now it's time to go unscripted. That means we're not just going off script, we're throwing out the script altogether.
Each week, we're joined by fellow Farm Journal hosts and editors to peel back the layers on stories we've shared throughout the week.
Unscripted. It's real, it's raw, it's entertaining, and it's your chance to meet the personalities behind the personalities. I'm Tyne Morgan.
And I'm Clinton Griffiths. Welcome to Unscripted. Hey everyone, welcome to Unscripted. Tyne, I would say the one thing that is really raw right now is the election. It's very raw.
I can't believe the last time we talked, it was before the election. I mean, not only how much has changed since that, but holy cow, how many cabinet picks and key advisory positions that President-elect Donald Trump has already selected in, really, I mean, a week out, he had selected a historic amount. And now we have more. As of Friday morning, when we're talking, we still are waiting on one key position. But my gosh, they say things move slow in Washington. You know what? I think President-elect Donald Trump's like, hold my beer. That's what I think is happening.
Yeah, I'm just going to roll them out as fast as I can. It is interesting because it is like, before the last time we talked, we had another administration. There was outlook for that administration to possibly continue. Then there was the challenger, now President-elect Donald Trump, who came in and won, the majority of electoral college votes. And so in a pretty big, what looks to be like a pretty big win where they, get the presidency, the Senate, and the House, although that's still a little up in the air, but, it's been called for Republicans. We've had a new leader of the Senate, John Thune, who's been elected and nominated to lead the Senate going forward. All kinds of stuff has happened. And so it's just, change is the one constant I think we always count on, right?
Yeah, and we are going to see plenty of it. I think we learned that during the first administration, good and bad, right? I mean, change is good, and then sometimes change is scary and risky, and we saw a lot of that the last time. But it will be interesting to see how his second term, as Jim Wiesmeyer put it, Trump learned a lot during his first term. And so he is hitting the ground running. And I think some of these key picks are an example of that. But, with so much going on, we really wanted someone else from Washington who could give some of that perspective because, the mood in Washington, as we see all of these changes, we saw how Washington, D.C. voted in the last election. It did not reflect how the rest of the country voted. So that was pretty interesting. But we need someone in Washington. And so, we had Jim on last time. He was great talking leading into the election. But Clinton, who else would we have on but Dr. J?
Dr. J, that's right. John Newton with Terrain. Let's have him on. John, hey, what's going on?
Not much. That's a heck of an introduction. I appreciate it. I do live in the reddest district in Washington, D.C.
Interesting.
The area, Capitol Hill, I live in, got 22% of the vote for Donald Trump.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah, I would thought it was like 80% had gone Democrat in Washington, D.C.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are areas where it's over 90%, but where I live on Capitol Hill is 20% for Donald Trump. So some of my neighbors did their part.
Oh my gosh. How many? So yeah, because in total, how many, because I looked at the election results and how many total votes did he have? I mean, it a couple thousand. I'm trying to remember what I saw.
I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 to 8,000 votes in DC. Yeah.
Interesting. But now returning to DC, lots of change. Lots of things happening. John, before we get all the way into what's happening with the election, we talk some tea. Let's set up a little bit of your background and a little bit of your story. What are you up to these days? But I mean, you spent some time there on Capitol Hill as well.
I did. I spent 4 years with Senator Bozeman on the Ag Committee as the chief economist. Before joining the Ag Committee, folks may remember I was the chief economist for the American Farm Bureau for a number of years, but I've been working in the ag policy space for close to 20 years. I started at USDA. I'm one of the few people that have actually worked for a Democrat and Republican on the Ag Committee. I did a detail with Senator Stabenow about a decade ago. Worked with Joe Glauber in the office of the chief economist for a short period of time. So I've had the opportunity to sit in a lot of seats around town, and now I'm part of the Farm Credit family with Terrain. We're I'd say an enhancement to the services that are provided by American Ag Credit, Farm Credit Services of America, and Frontier Farm Credit. So I'm happy to be part of the Farm Credit family. The funny thing, the first person that called me when I changed jobs was Zippy Duvall, and he goes, "You're not taking Amy out of DC, are you?" And Amy, my wife, she works at Farm Bureau and helps make the Farm Bureau run. And I was like, "No, we're not. We're not moving out of town." And he just went on to rave about how much he loves Farm Credit. It really is a special place to be.
Yeah,
Okay, so but Dr. J, your nickname, how did that come about?
So when I first started on the committee, I think we went through a series of what's my nickname going to be, and it ultimately settled on Dr. J. There was John Economist at one point in time. I had to quickly reject that one, but Dr. J settled pretty quickly, and I think I even signed Christmas cards to Dr. J when I was up there.
That is
That's awesome.
hilarious. Clinton, do you have a nickname?
Well, I would have probably gone with Johnny Neutron or Johnny Newtown, something fun like that.
Clinton's
But
our creative
Dr.
one.
J is, I mean, being a basketball fan, I mean,
That's
I
me
get it.
right here.
I get it. I mean, it's hard to beat.
Clinton, do you have a nickname?
Oh, yeah, they used to call me McClintock back in the day.
Why?
Oh,
I don't know. That's what they called me.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I was McClintock for a long time. Yeah. My brother was
Mine,
Griff or Baby Griff. And so, like, there was a lot of that.
John knows mine. Mine was Tynomite.
Dynamite.
Because when I was in college, everybody would say Tyne. Is that short for something? And so I just got so tired of like trying to say,
Mm.
just saying no. I can be kind of ornery at times. And so I was like, yeah,
Mhm.
it's short for Tynomite. And so it stuck. And I still have friends that call me Tynomite. Okay, so moving on to real business, John. But I
Real
need the
business
background on Dr. J. But I love it. I think that's perfect, Dr. J. I hope you sign all of your emails that way to Clinton and I in the future, by the way. And that's
from
how I'm
now
going to
on.
address you when I reach out to you for information, like we're doing today, John, because
yeah.
there's so many names being thrown around. Clinton and I talked about it. I mean, are you surprised by the rapid pace that President-elect Trump is naming some of these key cabinet positions?
No, I'm not.
Hold
Oh,
on just a
uh-oh.
second. We got to talk tea first. Let's talk
Uh-oh.
tea on this.
Well, I
Oh,
have something else I want to ask him on Talking Tea, but yes, I
oh,
guess
okay, fine.
we
Let's
can
talk tea.
start with this. Are you
Are
surprised
you yes?
Am I surprised at what?
how the rapid pace that he's
Oh,
naming some of
no,
these
no,
cabinet
no, not
positions?
at all. I'm not surprised because really, months ago, Speaker Johnson started to think about if we have the triple play, if we have the House, if we have the Senate, if we have the White House, we need to get out of the gates running. We can't waste time.
Hmm.
We've got expiring Tax Cut Jobs Act provisions. We've got a farm bill we need to get done. We need to get cabinet officials in place to start executing the agenda. And the longer you wait, the more time it takes. So I'm not surprised at all that they're starting to fill these cabinet positions. And they've even talked about recess confirmations as a way to accelerate the way to get people into these seats. So I'm not surprised at all.
I know getting cabinet positions confirmed, it can be kind of a lengthy process, and it does seem like they're trying to work ahead here. Anybody or any names that you've seen come across yet that you've been surprised by or that has caught you off guard?
Is
Or
that what
all of
T
them?
is that what T means?
Yeah, we are setting you up.
Yeah.
I plead the fifth.
I want to.
Some people may
You
need a fifth by the time this is over.
know, I think I think everybody was curious where RFK would land, and you see
Mm,
that announcement yesterday.
mhm.
Uh,
Health and
Matt
Human
Gates,
Services. Yep.
right. Matt Gates, I think, surprised. I mean, I think it even surprised Speaker Johnson because he had a resignation effective immediately. But you're right; they do still have to go through the Senate confirmation process. They got to get votes from the Republicans. With a majority, they can do that, but there are obstacles before you get to that point. Democrats can place holds on them that can prevent you from
Right.
moving into the cloture vote. So it's not as easy as it may seem to get these people in these seats.
Well, and I mean, you look at Ag Secretary Vilsack, even that one. I mean, how long did it take to get him approved? I mean, we saw him nominated, and I forget when we saw Biden tap him, but it was, I mean, it was a
It was
while.
late. Yeah, it
It
was
was
in
late,
January.
Yeah.
and it took a while to get him approved, and so we know that things may not happen quickly. But I think you kind of alluded to it, John. We're hearing that maybe Trump will try to go around the traditional process and get some of these key cabinet picks in quickly. But I mean, I talked to Jim Wiesmeyer this week, and he thinks there's no way that Gates gets approved by Congress, and he doesn't think because also with RFK Jr., he goes, remember, he's a Democrat. And I don't know if we're going to have any Democrats that will vote for him. But it's been some interesting picks, some very diverse picks. I mean, you look at his chief of staff, first female nominated for that position. I mean, we've had a very diverse pick here, but so far out of all of them, I know you talked about some of your surprises, but what do you think so far is his best pick?
I mean, I'm probably biased because I had the opportunity to visit with Senator Rubio a number of times, and just to hear his perspective on foreign affairs and national defense and security. I mean, he's very passionate. I mean, he was even passionate about during the Russia-Ukraine invasion when that first happened. He was interested on global food security. He was interested in foreign ownership of farmland. He's an excellent pick. I'm very pleased to see that.
Yeah, well, it has been interesting to see, and Rubio, Secretary of State, now nominated for, or I guess chosen to be the Secretary of State. There are some things on the docket there that he'll have to work through, like Ukraine and the situation in Israel and the Middle East, and of course, all eyes on what's happening in China constantly. Of course, this is kind of what a lot of the Republicans are focused on, but we still have a lame duck session of Congress. Our question that we keep asking Jim Wiesmeyer, or Jimmy Dubs, as I like to call him, is what do you think about a farm bill? Is that going to get shoved through the pipeline here?
I'm optimistic that you can get one done, but I think the first thing that needs to happen is there needs to be some signal from the chairwoman of the Ag Committee that she wants to do something. I don't think there's been no statement, no public statement. Are they having meetings? Is she going to release bill text? Right now, the ball's in her court. Chairman Thompson's done his part. He's got a bipartisan farm bill out of committee. I think if the principals can agree that this is what the basic structure of this next 5-year contract with farmers and ranchers is going to look like, then the staff can get it done. And right before I left, I asked the Congressional Budget Office, I said, if we deliver you a full farm bill, because you have to get it scored, right? Lawmakers need to know how much this thing's going to cost. I said, if we deliver you a full 5-year farm bill, let's say a few weeks left in the lame duck, can you guys score it? And they said, that's our job to get it scored. So we will deliver. So I'm optimistic that we can get it done, but the clock is ticking. 4.5 weeks left. I think a lot of the legwork has been done, but there's still some big items left to cross off the decision list.
John, you had a direct hand when you were with the Senate Ag Committee. There's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And I think for agriculture, the frustrating thing is you're like, okay, you've had how many years to get this done? Why can't this get done? But you guys work around the clock to try to get this done. But
Absolutely.
what is it? I mean, we haven't even seen the text from the Senate Ag Committee. So can you explain to us what is the holdup? Why? I mean, House Ag Committee did their job. Why haven't we seen the Senate Ag Committee do theirs?
Well, so it's a little complicated. First, when I got there 4 years ago, we spent the first 2 years dealing with budget reconciliation, the Inflation Reduction Act, going through that whole bird rule process on challenging provisions of the IRA. That was what we did for 2 years. And mind you, at that point in time, farm production expenses were going through the roof. Farmers were coming into Capitol Hill saying, input costs have gone up so much, I need you to do a farm bill. That should be the focus. We had our first listening session 2 years ago in June at Michigan State. And Senator Bozeman, for the last few years, he's traveled the country as did Chairman Thompson, listening to farmers about what the priorities should be in this next farm bill. And Senator Bozeman heard it loud and clear. I think the Republican colleagues on the Ag Committee heard it loud and clear. They continue to hear it loud and clear when they go back home. The challenge is, being in the minority, which we were, we can't release bill text. We can't schedule a hearing. You can't do any of that. The ball is in the court of the majority. So it would be up for Stabenow to release bill text, schedule a markup, potentially have amendments. That's what the majority does. The majority leads, as Chairman Thompson did on the Farm Bill. That's why you haven't seen anything on the Senate side yet, is you're still waiting on what Senator Stabenow, may or may not ultimately release. And with her retiring in the next, few weeks, I think it's critically important, legacy-wise, to deliver for agriculture in rural America.
Well, that was going to be my.
Go ahead.
That was going to be my question. Wouldn't she want this to be part of her legacy?
One would hope so.
Well, and I just, I know time is short. We're in a lame duck session, but to me, the question is, this is an opportunity maybe to do something bipartisan for the Democrats, specifically in the Senate, to maybe get something that everybody can somewhat agree on, given that the leadership in the Senate and in the House is going to be Republican here. So I don't know. It seems like that makes sense, maybe to try to work on something that everybody could get behind. But, I guess they haven't released the text yet and they're running out of time.
But the thing that you point out there, what was it? What was the nickname, Clinton? McClintock. McClintock. Yeah. The thing, McClintock, is farm bills are always bipartisan. The last farm bill was overwhelming.
Right. And they should be 100%.
87 yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's an opportunity to do something bipartisan for ag, for rural America. You're probably going to see that in an ag disaster package that moves. Farmers right at harvest were dealing with catastrophic hurricanes coming up the Cotton Belt, going through, citrus operations in Florida, historic drought out west, 22-year mega drought that they're dealing with. So you're going to see bipartisanship there. Why can't we see it in a farm bill over the next 4.5 to 5 weeks? Right. Remains to be seen.
John, what is the biggest thing you think that we need to update or change in the farm bill that would be beneficial for the average farmer?
There's so many things. And the thing about it, we would always talk about, these are the communities in rural America that farmers and ranchers call home. And there have to be economic opportunities there, whether that means an updated safety net, updates to crop insurance so that farmers and ranchers can go to their banker. And they're doing that now. They're going in with their farm credit lenders and starting to plan for next year, to know they have risk management tools in place so that if the market turns on them like it has now, they don't risk the whole farm, that their kids want to come back to the farming operation. You can do that with enhancements to the risk management tools, but it's more than that. You look at ag trade. We've got a negative, projected to have a trade deficit in ag of $42.5 billion. Funding for ag trade promotion programs has pretty much been stagnant for over a decade. You did see some tapping of the CCC to try to shore that up a little bit, but inflation hits our export promotion partners as much as it hits everybody else. So we could touch that. Ag research, our land grant universities need investments in facilities so they can stay on the leading edge of agricultural research. Right now, we're getting lapped by foreign countries around the world and what they're spending on ag research. The list is long. Rural childcare, rural health care, so many things, broadband that's in this, that could be in this farm bill, that would go a long way for agriculture in rural America. And then 80% of it's also nutrition program spending for elderly, children, the disabled. You can make improvements there to make sure these programs work better for those in need.
Dr. J, I talked to we're going to do this thing with the nicknames. I talked to a farmer last week who has been, of course, their farm, they're feeling some urban sprawl, but they have decided to do some building on one of their farms for town. And one of the things they specifically decided to include is an urgent care center. And the reason for that is there is nowhere that you can get an x-ray within an hour of them. So if you need to see a doctor and maybe you broke an arm or a leg or whatever their kids did, they have to drive over an hour to see somebody. And so they decided, you know what, if we're going to face this pressure of urban development and urban sprawl, we're going to develop this farm ourselves, and we're going to ask to put in an urgent care center for our community. And I just feel like, they're not the only ones dealing with it. Whenever we travel across the country and through, the rural parts of America, there's just in a lot of places, there's not even a grocery store or anywhere to even get food. You've got to drive a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour to find one.
When I was in Omaha at the Farm Bureau Young Farmer and Rancher Conference, and one of the things we talked about is how many farmers have off-farm sources of income. They got a job off the farm, and it's hard to have a job off the farm if you don't have childcare. And there were families that said we have to drive an hour to find childcare. So in the same way that you're talking about, an urgent care for medical, broken bones, anything that happens, these communities, in a lot of these communities, when you get out there, agriculture is the backbone of that economy. And if you lose agriculture, there's not much left. You lose those turn back dollars, you lose the schools, you lose the hospitals. I heard another statistic that 50% of the doctors in rural America are going to retire within the next 5 to 10 years.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine? And I know it's hard to get people to move to those places if there aren't opportunities only for them and for their family or for their kids, or, there's not a sports team for their kid to play on, or there's, not clubs for them to join. I mean, it's hard as a parent to say, hey, we're going to go here and do this. And a lot of times they have to go and create it themselves. Right, Tyne and Clinton?
Yeah. I mean, it's, they're talking about school of choice and different things coming in with this next administration. But, John, where we live, we're a town of 800. An aspiring young doctor would probably not move here because our
Does everybody call you Dynamite in that town?
No, but maybe they will after this. I'm gonna have
it's coming.
I mean, John, most of these kids in school think that because I try to do so much for the school. I love our community. I try to do so much for the school. Most of these kids at the school don't even know what I do for a living. They think that I'm the voice of the Bearcats. Like that is my full-time job. They don't understand that actually doesn't come with a paycheck.
Do we still have that picture of Tyne in the mascot uniform?
I dressed up in our mascot, John, for homecoming because nobody else would. And I'm like, we can't have a pep assembly without a damn mascot. Like, this is ridiculous.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's me doing the gritty. That's me doing the gritty, John. I practiced it so much that my little girl did not think that was me because they thought the gritty was too good. And I'm like, well, I have been practicing. Thank you.
That's Can I screenshot this?
The pictures. I wish they had video, but we put in a no cell phone policy at school apparently, so nobody was there to take video. But like our town, there's not going to be any young doctor that wants to move here. We don't have an all-weather track. We don't have a turf field. We don't have, we barely have enough to make a basketball team. So, there are those challenges. But you mentioned agriculture. You mentioned farmers being the backbone of the community, and a lot of times they are the biggest business in that community. And right now, there is some real pain. Yes, livestock sector looks good, but you look at the row crop sector, John, and things don't look good. Zach, if you can pull up from the Ag Bankers Association, their Ag Lending Conference this week that was in Milwaukee, and they came out and they say, when they survey ag lenders, just over half of farmers, the ag lenders say, will be profitable in 2024. Just over half of farmers, John. And I was talking to a couple of our analysts that were on the show this weekend, Mark Golden and Mike North. And I asked him, I said, what is the mood? What is the sentiment of rural bankers this week? And Mark said, Tyne, there's a lot of concerns about bankruptcies. There's a lot of concerns. And I don't think it's going to be as bad as what these ag lenders think, but there is some real concern out there. You look at this graph, John, does any of this surprise you?
No, it doesn't. And I think, when I was on the committee, we were talking about this for 2 years. We said, look, input costs are record high. They reached record. I'm looking at the cost of production for corn, $930 an acre in 2022. We knew that. And we also knew that these prices weren't going to stay at those levels. They were coming down. USDA just updated their forecast for 2025 cost of production. It's still $870 an acre total cost to raise corn. And guess what? USDA's projection for the corn price next year is $3.90. No one's making money at $3.90 a bushel corn or $10 a bushel soybeans when the costs of production are this high. And that's where you think about diversification, McClintock, and it might not be we're gonna distill some corn and make a
Right.
a value added bourbon or something like that. Maybe it's we're gonna put a hospital. That's a form of diversification as well. People are starting to get creative because
Buying
it's
car
hard.
washes. John, the number of farmers that I know that have bought car washes is crazy.
that's a statistic that I'm going to keep in my
I'm
pocket.
serious.
Put that in your start looking that in your economics numbers. How does that factor in?
Several farmers that I did not know car washes were such a big moneymaker. And I know several that have. In fact, I told James, which my husband doesn't listen to me, I told him we should invest in Bitcoin. And he said, with what money? Good point. But then Bitcoin goes crazy. I told him we should buy a car wash. He doesn't listen to me, but I'm telling you, I listen to these farmers. They are some of the smartest entrepreneurs and business people out there. And so if I hear a farmer say, listen, I'm doing this, you take note. Take note.
Well, there
Pitch a
aren't many car
laundromat
washes
next.
in DC, but I'll go get one.
You need to move out to where you're on a gravel road. It looks like my car hasn't seen a car wash in 10 years, but
right. Well, and it was like 2 days ago. Like, you gotta love a dirt road. Dr. J, so as we talk about economics going into 2025, and you look at these numbers constantly, what are your biggest, I don't want to call them red flags, but what are your biggest concerns, or what are the things that stand out to you as like, hey, if you're a farmer, you need to pay attention here?
I was at NAFB all day yesterday, and that was one of the questions I got from everybody is, what are we going to do in 2025? What are we looking at? And I think what I'm looking at and thinking about is not where we're projected to be, but how do we get out of that? What needs to happen to turn this around? And so it all starts with demand. And right now, I haven't seen the latest export sales report numbers that came out this morning, but corn exports have been pretty strong. I think among the highest they've been going back in decades, at least in the top four in the strength of corn export sales so far in the year. Mexico's our top market for ag exports. Canada's number 2. China's number 3. So I think all eyes are going to be on this next administration. How do we proceed with agricultural exports to our top markets? Is there an opportunity? Is President Trump going to come in and sit down and look at USMCA and say, here's what's working well, here's what's not working well? Is he going to sit down with the Chinese and say, hey, by the way, if you read the phase 1 agreement, McClintock, there is a section in there that said it should have continued. They should have continued buying U.S. agricultural products. And they bought $30 billion a year for 3 straight years in a row. And now they're back down to $24 billion. They were supposed to continue. What if that happens? What if these exports, what if the fears that everyone has that we're going to lose these markets is actually the opposite? And we return to those type of sales. That's something that can help turn this thing around. So I'm focused pretty heavily on the opportunities that we have in U.S. agriculture ahead of us. We're the best in the world at what we do. We have the highest quality products. We just need an opportunity to get out there and deliver those products to the global market.
We're looking at that this weekend on U.S. Farm Report. Will Trump actually be good for trade? Or is it going to play out where all of these fears come to fruition? But as you pointed out, phase 1, let's talk about phase 1 of China. I mean, you mentioned it, but how much did they not follow through on? I mean, you look at U.S. meat exports, they've scaled back on that. You look at dairy purchases, they've scaled back on that. You look at everything that they haven't done. It's hard to predict what Trump's going to do. But if he does have Lighthizer as his U.S. trade representative, which is kind of what the Financial Times had been reporting last week, if you do have Lighthizer in play, are they going to come? I mean, they learned a lot from the first 4 years. So do you say, listen, we got to pick back up where we left off, and you did not follow through on phase 1, let alone phase 2 and all of these other phases? And could it actually be good? Because they've scaled back on a lot of buys from us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've shifted some of those purchases, obviously, to South America. But the other challenge they have is their economy is not in great shape.
Right.
You know, the
They've done
mass.
stimulus, right?
So, you know, I think there's all sorts of things to watch, you know, trade wise, macro, you know, in the macro world on, you know, their economic health. But there can be opportunities, I think, and that'll help turn this thing around, because we can't continue with these input costs at these levels and prices at low levels. Something, you know, those are forces that don't work well together. And I think you're starting to see a little bit of that crack in the land in the asset value market. Used
Mm.
machinery prices have come down quite a bit too. Farmers don't have the cash in the pocket that they did a few years ago. And oh, by the way, interest expenses are still pretty high. They've
Right.
come down a little
Yeah.
bit, but I don't know if we're going to see another interest rate cut this year.
No, they kind of alluded that they may not see another one
Well,
this
and look at
year.
long-term rates, John. It doesn't matter what the Fed's doing. Midterm and long-term rates are still going up. And so for farmers, and you look at a lot of their purchasing decisions, they haven't benefited from the rate cut that we saw from the Fed,
Mhm.
because because they're concerned about inflation, because they're concerned about some of these things. So it'll be interesting to see where we go from that. Real quick, John, USMCA, Canada,
hmm
and Mexico. There's a
Yeah.
lot of things out of USMCA that we're benefiting from. There are some concerns with biotech when it comes to Mexico, and dairy when it comes to Canada. And as National Milk Producers Federation, as they told me this week, Canada's just flat out not doing what they said they were going to do. They are flat out ignoring this agreement. Do
Mm.
you think that Trump is going to call them out on that?
I don't know what Trump's going to do, but I can agree. I can agree with you that, you know, when you look at some of the technical provisions of USMCA, you know, on Canada and what they're allowed to do with their milk powder and how they price it, yeah, they're not doing what they were supposed to do. They found loopholes to get around some of the things that were
Mm.
designed to stop some of the behaviors
Right.
that they were doing. Um, so, you know, maybe that's something that gets looked at. I certainly think that with Ambassador Dowd at National Milk. You know, I'm sure he has a great relationship with Ambassador Lighthizer. If they go back to the table on USMCA, are they going to talk about dairy? I can't imagine they won't. But there's also, you know, with electric vehicles in China, the manufacturing, skirting, uh, that China's building these factories on the border. I mean, there's a lot of very uh, I guess economically consequential things that are happening that need to be addressed.
You know, you mentioned Greg Dowd there. Greg Dowd's name has been coming up in other ways here
Yeah,
lately. Can we
heard his name quite a
pull
bit
up
this week.
our other graphic there, Zach? This is the list, the long list of, and it may not be everybody, of potential secretaries of agriculture. Of course, this could be settled at any time. It could be settled by the time we finish here.
Mhm.
But as you look at this list, John, what do you think? What's your gut reaction?
There are a lot of good friends on that list.
I
No.
was just about to say, you mentioned one of those. You mentioned Zippy. We've already mentioned Greg. You mentioned Greg earlier. There's a couple of these that you have thrown in there, John. And I had reached out to a couple of them this week before I knew they were on the list. One of these on the list was on vacation. The other one said they couldn't speak. I told them I was taking that as a sign they were the next Secretary of Ag. So
That's right. Well, I mean, as this always goes, I mean, and even after their name gets kind of put out there and read, you know, for a lot of these folks, they just can't say anything until the paint is dry, and even then, it's a more measured comments than they can say before. But there'll probably be a number of these folks that'll be free to comment here sooner than later, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. And last time there were names that were floated, and I think they were floated to see what the response would be from the
totally.
ag community.
Yep.
You
Mm.
know, if people all of a sudden have a knee-jerk reaction on person you know, A, B, or C. So I think there's that happens as well. But there's well-qualified people on this list. I've known Mr. McKinney since you know, when I was at Farm Bureau and Indiana Department of Agriculture, and
Mm.
I've known Chairman Thompson. We've worked really closely together, Senator Bozeman and him and our teams. And Miss Hyde Smith was Secretary of Ag in Mississippi, so she knows a thing or two. I think her family's in the cattle business down there. So there are a lot of really qualified people on this list. Everybody loves Ray Starling in town. So A lot of friends, a lot of well-qualified people, and it's important to have somebody in that seat that can walk into the Oval Office and say, this is why policy A, B, or C
Yep.
is important to agriculture. This is why farmers depend on the renewable fuel standard. This is why trade with Mexico or China is important. And Secretary Perdue did that very early on in his role when there was discussion about getting out of NAFTA. He went in and said, Mr. President, it's famous. He had a map that showed where agricultural exports went and why it's important to the folks that put President Trump in office. So that's the most important thing, is to have somebody in that seat that works well with agriculture and is a good ambassador for us in the Oval Office.
That was Ray and Secretary Perdue, right? It was those two that went in together, I think, because Ray had written about it in his book as well, Ray Starling, that they went in together and said, you cannot pull out of NAFTA, and this is why.
Yeah.
John, you kind of alluded to it there, but how important do you think experience in that policy circle is in being able to handle this position with this administration, given the pressure that we know we're going to see from, the Lee Zeldin, who's going to take over the EPA, or from RFK, who looks like he's doing health and human services and will be focused on health and food. It seems to be a hot topic for him.
I mean, I think leadership is important in these roles. The ability to, command a room, to talk with clarity and explain an issue in a way that the president's going to understand, convey it to them. And that's challenging. It's hard to do. It's hard to be an effective communicator. It's hard to stand up for what you believe in. But I'm pretty sure, matter of fact, I'm certain that agriculture is going to find that person that's going to be their voice, a strong voice in the room that supports them on all these fronts.
Dr. J, you have any concerns about biofuels policy going forward, or is that always a concern?
I think last go round, the biofuel folks were pretty quick out of the gate to get in the room and start to talk about why biofuel policy was important to them. I think you look at Mr. Zeldin and you think, all right, well, agriculture has an opportunity to sit down and talk with him. No decisions have been made yet, McClintock. And that's where folks in this city, the ag community has a strong voice. When they're united and they go and push in the same direction, they can get some incredible things done. And that's what they will do. They will go in and start to educate these new cabinet officials on agriculture, rural America, because on January 21st, there's going to be a whole slew of executive orders that are dropped, a deregulatory agenda, and agriculture is already in the process of kind of putting ideas out there, surfacing ideas to help not only President Trump, but the transition team identify, here's some things that we need in agriculture, and ensuring that they've got a seat at the table. That's really important.
Real quick, before we move on to the next segment, I mean, you look at Zeldin, and the concern is that if you look at his track record, he hasn't really been favored. He's been more on the big oil side than he has on the ethanol side. But John, I mean, so much has changed in the last 5 years. Look at how many oil companies now have biodiesel plants, have some of these refineries. Right. It seems like now
they've made the investment,
and big ag are more on, at least in the same chapter. I'm not going to say the exact same page, but at least in the same chapter than we were, 4 years ago or 8 years ago. And so, my question is, it seems like maybe there could be some way for big ag and big oil to work together. And so maybe these fears that are out there of, well, is he going to mess with the RFS? How are we going to see him lower some of these mandates and these levels? It seems like it's changed, and big oil and big ag are more on the, at least, like I said, in the same chapter.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, there's opportunities to collaborate. I don't necessarily like the word big ag, because I still think of
Right.
all these farm families around the country that unite and have a strong voice. But there is an opportunity, and when you look at renewable diesel, you look at the opportunities with sustainable aviation fuel. There is a need to collaborate. The renewable energy products that we can produce in agriculture are a key to the success of this economy, and so working together is critically important.
If we can get 45Z, if we can keep use cooking oil out and actually use our soybeans and see some demand. I mean, that's kind of the one of the
Now you're
things.
talking.
Can that be our saving grace? Can that be where this added demand comes from? Even if we do have some, if we get into another trade war scenario, or if we do see our exports impacted. I mean, John, what the heck is going on with 45Z? What the heck is going on with some of these biofuel mandates that we're waiting on an answer right now from this current administration?
Well, and I had the opportunity. I was in Kansas City at an AgriPulse event. This is my first day on the job with Terrain, representing our farm credit partners, and I was on a panel with Seth Meyer, and we were talking about 45Z, and we were talking about the clarity that's needed. And the thing I think that people forget is this was all part of the Inflation Reduction Act, which went through reconciliation, which means we never had any hearings. We never sat down and talked about used cooking oil or carbon intensity scores of Brazilian sugarcane or Brazilian corn. That was never part of the discovery process as we're putting this thing together. And now we find ourselves having to explain why it's more sustainable to put Brazil sugar ethanol on a boat and roll it all the way up to California, and somehow that's more sustainable.
Don't get me started on that, John. That's my
Or
soapbox.
use cooking oil that might be palm oil, who knows, coming out of China, that's more sustainable than what's grown in our own backyard.
Right.
If we would have had hearings, if this would have been done through regular order, maybe agriculture would have had more of a voice, but it didn't happen that way. And now we're left to kind of navigate the uncertainty.
Are we going to see any final guidance on that between now and January 20th?
I don't know. I think right now there are efforts to move a lot of things before January 20th. Some of their priorities, get money out the door for things that they want to fund. I don't know where 45Z and that guidance stands on their priority list, but the thing that you do know is TCJA and those expiring provisions means that taxes are going to be on the agenda very early in the next Congress. Back in 2017, TCJA was HR 1. That was the first bill that Paul Ryan, as Speaker, introduced was tax policy. You know what the second one was?
No, what?
HR 2, which was the Farm Bill.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting. Yeah. John, one more question, Tyne, before we move on. How important is inflation to policy decisions for this next administration?
I mean, I think it's incredibly important, McClintock. I mean, we had historic inflation. Farmers saw it, the whole economy saw it. I think the median age of the population in this country is around the age of 40. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but that was the highest level of inflation that many Americans have ever seen in their lifetime.
Yep.
And what a lot of people forget about inflation, they look at it now. What did it come in this week at 2.6% year over year? They look at that and say, "Oh, inflation's cooling." They forget that it's cumulative.
Right. Exactly.
Right?
What was the point last year? 6%.
Well, and you had to empty your wallet to get to today. You've gone through your savings. Your car insurance that's up 60-70% from 4 years ago. That eats away at your disposable income. It eats away at your savings. People voted based on their pocketbook. They voted based on safety in their communities.
Yep.
People didn't feel safe. So I think inflation is incredibly important. Bringing costs down is going to be incredibly important. And that's why I think the Fed is kind of pulling back a little bit and saying, wait, maybe we were a little too aggressive. You don't want inflation to pick back up. The jobs report, which was affected by the hurricanes, came in pretty poorly. So I think they want to sit back and say, let's see how these 2 rate cuts, percolate through the economy.
And my own 2 cents. This is my own 2 cents. I just feel like a new administration, they cannot risk sparking a jump in inflation. So you can't do anything that is going to take 4% or 5% of production or food production out because you've decided on a new policy or a new direction. You've got to at least keep food coming through the system so that it doesn't spike inflation. We can change formulations, but at the same time, you can't drop production 4 or 5% and not expect to see food inflation go crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was something that When I was on the committee, we were pointing out every month we would issue a report. We'd send it to all the offices on, how food costs had changed. And you'd see Republicans all the way, everybody would put that on social media because Americans knew, hey, the
Mhm.
cost of eggs is up 180%. Now that a lot of that was driven by the bird flu, but
Right.
people know that, and some people chose to ignore the impact of inflation, and that I think that's been a mistake.
Well, that leads into our next segment. What the Sigma? John, how old is your daughter?
9.
Does she use What the Sigma yet?
I'm gonna have to text her and find out.
Well,
But you can
apparently,
text her. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
apparently mine got in trouble on the bus for using What the Sigma. She comes home and says, Mom, our bus driver says What the Sigma to stop saying it because Sigma is not a real word. And I said it is, but it's not, we're not really using it in the right context. So I'll say things like skippity Ohio, like just randomly say these words because that's what the kids are saying. But yeah, What the Sigma means what the heck. My What the Sigma kind of ties into what you were just talking about, John, is
Mm.
the pure shock after
Mhm.
the election. We knew it could go either way, but some of the polls leading into it, I don't trust polls. And I think there's a reason I don't trust polls. And it's because if you look at the past few elections, it always leans one way, which is fine, but we've seen that not always bode well. And so this was Scott Jennings, the night of the election on CNN, just talking about kind of what Americans just said in this elections as they saw the results roll in.
I'm interpreting the results tonight as the revenge of just the regular old working class American, the anonymous American who has been crushed, insulted, condescended to. They're not garbage. They're not Nazis. They're just regular people who get up and go to work every day and are trying to make a better life for their kids. And they feel like they have been told to just shut up when they have complained about the things that are hurting them in their own lives. I also feel like this election, as we sit here and pour over this tonight, is something of an indictment of the political information complex. I mean, we've been sitting around here for the last couple of weeks, and the story that was portrayed was not true. I mean, we were told Puerto Rico was going to change the election. Liz Cheney, Nikki Haley voters, women lying to their husbands. Before that, it was Tim Walz and the camo hats. Night after night after night, we were told all these things and gimmicks were going to somehow push Harris over the line. And we were just ignoring the fundamentals. Inflation, people feeling like that they were barely able to tread water at best. That was the fundamentals of the election. And so I think that both parties should always look at the results of an election and figure out what went right and what went wrong. But I think for all of us who cover elections and talk about elections and do this on a day-to-day basis, we have to figure out how to understand, talk to, and listen to the half of the country that rose up tonight and said, we've had enough.
It's interesting. Interesting. What do you think,
I,
John? What's your read?
I literally just got a little cold chill. I mean, that's the reality.
It
Get to the
it feels
truth.
similar to the I think 2016,
Yeah.
if I go back a little bit.
Yeah, there was an NBC clip that we would use, Clinton, where it
Yeah.
said like, we've forgotten about rural America, and rural America has said, we've had enough. That's the clip that it reminded me of.
But it's not just rural America. I mean,
Right.
it's urban America. And I'll just share. I'm pretty sure that my sister-in-law doesn't listen to ag media or ag radio because she
That's
tells
weird.
everybody.
We're gonna have to change
Well,
that.
she tells everybody I'm just a soybean specialist.
She's
So
not
at
listening
Thanksgiving,
to Dynamite. She needs to.
at Thanksgiving, I'm just the soybean guy. But
Own it.
we were on vacation. She talked about how, with their 2 kids, 4 cars, their car insurance for the year is $14,000. Can you imagine that? I can't imagine. I mean, that's inflation. That's crushing, and that's not going back down. That's here to stay.
Right. I mean, what is it when inflation goes backward? It's deflation, right?
hmm
The chances of that, and how many times has that ever happened? It doesn't happen much, if
It,
ever, and you don't want it to really. Although
well,
we
I
all
mean,
want that a little bit.
I think there are probably some sectors where you do see it. I mean, energy prices fluctuate pretty heavily,
Right.
Okay, I
or
got you.
but you know, insurance prices and property casualty insurance. I talked to a lot of my friends back at Farm Bureau. You know, lumber costs have gone up. To rebuild after a catastrophic natural disaster
Mm,
costs a lot of money now, a lot more than it did 4 or 5 years ago. So insurance
Right.
premiums have gone up. I mean, all across the board, things are more expensive, and in a lot of these critical sectors, you're not going to see costs come down very much,
no,
if at all.
it is interesting. Do you have a what the sigma? Oh, that is your
I
what the
mean, that
sigma.
was, I mean, just,
I
I think
I have one.
it's everything. You talked, car insurance has gone up significantly, and after the hurricanes, the amount of cars that were damaged. It's not only accidents have gone up since 2020, but now with some of the hurricanes, those, and so we're going to see car insurance. You mentioned it, but it's
Hmm.
gonna go up even more. We've seen health insurance go up
Hmm.
significantly. I mean, it's all of these costs. We talk about food, we talk about energy, we talk about some of these other costs that we're dealing with farmers. It's a lot of these input costs, but it's all of these other costs, medical costs, insurance costs, all health insurance and car insurance that is
Hmm.
adding to the pain for all of Americans. And we really saw that as a resounding, message in this last election.
Absolutely.
Well, my what the sigma was courtesy of X Benjamin Renchie, who's a farmer in Iowa, and Tyne, you've been out to his place. We know him pretty well. He's a really big farmer out there. He tweeted that saw that there was a social media influencer who farmed 20 acres in central Iowa. Have you seen this? Did you
Yeah.
see this post?
Yeah.
Uh, they gave him everything. So he could use any tool that he wanted to use. So brand new X9, See and Spray, like every tool in the toolbox was available to him. And not a farmer per se. So this young guy grew 208 bushel per acre corn, pretty good corn. His profit was $1.10.
Wow.
I mean, can you imagine? I
And all
mean,
of the things that he had that were handed to him, not, it's I just,
right.
the average American doesn't understand what it takes to grow a bushel of corn, doesn't understand, the increased regulation. I was in California last week, John, and just talking to these farmers and these producers, some of them were like, I don't understand why we need an ethanol mandate. Why can't it stand on its own? And they look at all of the extreme regulations that they are facing, the water
Yeah.
restrictions that they're facing and everything. I mean, as we talk about it with the farm bill, John, it is not a one size fits all model for agriculture.
Mm.
Every crop is different, and so every region is different. The challenges are different. The opportunities are different. It is just so diverse, and I don't think the average American understands how hard it is to farm today.
I mean, you're spot on. I think one of the things that I did right before I left the Hill was just looking at these input costs and putting that into perspective for lawmakers. The farmers that walk into their room and maybe they farm 400 or 500 acres, they don't understand that they're taking out an operating loan that's a mortgage every single year.
Mm,
And there was one family that came in. They were from Texas. They raised cotton, and I'll never forget this as long as I'm doing this kind of work. Is they were concerned about their children. Said, I don't want to go back to the farm because I see how stressful it is for my parents to take out this massive amount of debt every single season to put a crop in the ground. They don't know if they're going to get a crop.
mm,
Mother Nature's their business partner, and one bad year could wipe them out. And they came in, they talked about it. They said crop insurance is incredibly expensive. We're raising a high value crop in cotton. So it's not $15 an acre for RP policy at 85%. It's 60, 70, 100, dollars an
mm.
acre for insurance. Um,
Yikes.
and that's on top of all these other expenses that have gone through the roof. And
Yep.
they just said, unless there's a better farm bill, I don't know if my children will come back to the farm. And that's what the Sigma.
Yeah, no, you said it, Dr. J. I mean, there's just so much money. It is so hard to kind of keep the kind of pushing the ball up the hill, right? And I think for a lot of young producers out there, and we see young producers come back to the farm, and we see people that are first generation that do it, but it takes a special person, and sometimes it takes a little bit of luck to make all of that work right now.
Yeah.
And so kind of as we change administrations and we bring in new leadership and we talk about a new farm bill and what's going to happen in the lame duck and all that, it really goes back to how do we protect what we have, which is really a national advantage globally to be able to grow the amount of food and feed people the way that we can. And it's real easy to forget. I think we remembered it a little bit during the pandemic. But it is really easy to forget how important it is and what an advantage it is for our country.
Absolutely. Food security is national security, 100%.
Well, and what it takes to grow it. We need some of those herbicides. We need some of those insecticides. We need some of those things that RFK Jr. is talking about getting rid of. And I don't think we'll get to that point. But John, I want to know, out of all of the things that RFK Jr.'s talked about, there's a lot. Not on the ag side, but even on the food side, his whole mission to make America healthy again. What could you get on board with? And then what do you not want to lose? What is the one food item you would not want to lose?
Oh man. Well, I think what I can get on board with, and I'm getting older, so I probably need to get on board with it, is probably reducing the amount of processed foods.
Yeah, I know. It's hard.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Nobody's going to argue there.
Yeah, eating clean is pretty healthy. And I try to do that quite a bit. What can I not have? You mean could I get rid of mac and cheese in my life? Is that what kind of question you're asking me?
Could you get rid of it?
Just having a whole row of processed foods that's nothing but Cabot mac and cheese, and I'm good to go. You can get rid of everything else.
Dairy farmers say thank you.
Yeah.
Clinton, what about you?
Well, let's see. I could get on board with maybe French fries and beef tallow. I've heard that's phenomenal. I'm if we want to switch back to that, maybe less veg oil and more natural fats. I'm okay with that. I wouldn't want to lose I kind of like chips, like chips and salsa. So I wouldn't want to lose that, I don't think. I'm a big chips and salsa guy. So
yeah, salsa's.
But that's a processed food. You know what I'm saying?
Technically, that would be. I guess I need a definition of what are they going to count as processed and what's not. I agree with Clinton. I want to try French fries and beef tallow. My husband's a big potato guy, and works for a potato company. So I mentioned this before. He's very frugal, and this should come as no surprise. He's saving like we're living till we're 150, and I'm spending like we're living until we're 55. Okay. And there's no happy medium there, John. There's no happy medium. Anyway.
I'm guessing Dr. J's got a spreadsheet for that.
But there's one thing, like if we go somewhere, we can potatoes, appetizer, he's on board. Okay. But I want to try French fries and beef tallow. And somebody on social media, it was Trey Cronin. He said, listen, let's make the cattle guys happy. Start frying potatoes and beef tallow. Take the veg oil and use that for biofuels, renewable diesel, all of that. Like that's where that can go. Let's make everybody happy. But, RFK Jr. saying it's not that French fries are not unhealthy. Potatoes are actually good for you. It's what they're cooked in. So I do want to try them with Clinton. I want to try French fries and beef tallow. What I could not give up. I mean, we're just going to stay with McDonald's since we're on that front. Have you ever had their holiday pie?
What? No.
Have you ever had their holiday pies?
I've had the apple pie back in the day. The one that was like molten lava hot when you bit into it.
John, have you never had their holiday pie?
That must be like a regional thing, kind of like Runza's or something like that.
Oh my gosh, in 2020, they did away with it. And the only state that had it around here was Illinois. And I had to go to Illinois twice. And I would stock up and buy 20 and bring it back home because the girls liked it too. And we put it in the freezer and then warm it up. Listen, their holiday pie is amazing. And so if they have a holiday pie in your backyard, you have got to try it. Clinton, John, it's vanilla custard.
Oh, interesting.
It's mate, do you not like vanilla custard, John?
I don't think I can get down with that one.
What are you, a chocolate pie?
I don't know. Not a vanilla.
More of a cake guy? Dessert? You like a cobbler? What do you? No. Ice cream. You're into ice cream. What are you into?
Besides bourbon, what's your go-to dessert?
Oh man. I get down with ice cream. Ice cream's good, but I don't know about the
What's on
custard.
your Thanksgiving dinner? No, not a pumpkin pie. You're not pecan pie, nothing like
No,
that.
I like pumpkin pie. I like a little derby pie too. You know.
Okay,
What is
okay.
derby pie?
No, it's like the sugary walnutty pie.
Yeah, it's like a
Oh.
maple, right?
Yeah.
Oh. So better than
Oh,
pecan pie? Derby pie is better than pecan pie?
Yeah, I think so. And we've got some other things. You know, I'm from the South, so
Oh, you are. I know. That's why I
we
said
got
bourbon. You're a Kentucky guy.
yeah, we've got you probably never had hot water cornbread.
ooh, no, I never
No.
had hot water
Yeah,
cornbread either.
yeah, yeah, there you go. That's good stuff.
See,
Oh, I'm gonna
these are
look
the
that
things
up. I'm Googling now.
RFK Jr. cannot take these away, but I'm just telling you, will you please just try a holiday pie for me? I'm just asking that of you. And when you go to McDonald's, maybe you don't because you're healthier than us. I mean, we're in small
No.
town America. All we have is McDonald's, okay? That's the girls' dance after dance. We have dance a couple times a week, and one time a week, that's their dinner. That's their treat, is they get to have McDonald's. Anyway, holiday pie. I'm telling
All
you,
right,
All right.
all
where's
right.
that?
We'll see what we can
Dynamite
do.
with preaching it. We'll give it a shot. I'm gonna take a picture and tweet it out
Please,
on the
I'm
X.
telling you, it's the finer things of life.
Mm.
Since their ice cream machine never works, but Trump's going to fix that, I heard. So
Yeah, right. Well, he had his last shift there, so maybe maybe he'll get it done. John, we really appreciate you taking time to jump on here with us on Unscripted. I know it's a little bit of an adventure. We've kind of covered a lot of ground, but really, really appreciate you taking time to be with us.
John,
Absolutely.
before we go, what are you most optimistic about for 2025? And what are you most concerned about?
I'm optimistic for the future of agriculture. I think we're going to get a strong Secretary of Ag in that seat. I think we're going to turn this thing around. We're going to see the farm economy strengthen again. We're going to see economic opportunities back in rural America. We're going to see a farm bill get over the finish line. We're going to see folks at USDA that know how to implement the farm bill and deliver it to farmers. That's what I'm optimistic on. What am I concerned about? Uh, I said to somebody the other day, we've had so many black swan events in
I
agriculture
know.
that at what point are we just going to start calling them swans?
Mm.
And so we don't know what's around the corner. I think the President Trump has talked about, ending these foreign wars, and I am concerned about that. We need to get back to being, um, the North Star for the world, and our reputation around the world needs to be enhanced, and we've got to end all that crazy nonsense. But I appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys. I was telling the Farm Journal folks, I can't wait to join Unhinged tomorrow.
Yeah.
And
Listen,
they're
Dr.
like,
J, that might be the
yeah,
best description I've ever heard.
It's Clinton. He's the unhinged one. I'm the same
That's
one in
right.
this relationship.
no, this has been great. I can't wait for everybody in DC to call me Dr. J now.
Yeah, that's right.
Trend. Yep, making it happen.
Yeah.
New trend.
All right,
Well,
Dr. J, thanks for joining us. Clinton, another good
appreciate it.
episode. Learned a
Yeah.
lot. There's a lot of craziness right now as we try to figure out what's gonna happen. But I love how John put a positive spin also on the good that could come out of some of these
Oh.
changes. Because I feel like, in the media, we focus a lot on the bad. We focus a lot. I mean, that's in the media world, they used to say, if it bleeds, it leads, right, Clinton?
Right.
That's the
Yep,
local news.
always.
If it bleeds, it leads. And thankfully, we're in ag where we don't have a lot of bleeding to talk about. And that's one reason we both like being in the profession that we're in and not being in local news. But, there's a lot of concerns out there. So I'm just glad John ended on that positive note on talking about, there is some hope. And I hope he's right. I hope this ag economy makes a turn and we have some new things, some black swan events that we didn't predict that are going to come into this picture and rescue the farm economy on the grains side. I hope that's
Yeah, I agree. It's obviously been a decent year on the livestock side of things, but on the grain side for sure going into 2025, always some concerns. But I did like the way he did end it by saying we need to get back to being the light and being light for the world. And
North Star.
That is the hope, right? As we go forward, we can be a North Star for others, and that we can continue to not just feed ourselves, but feed the world. So, Tyne, appreciate it. As
Thank
always.
you. Until next time.
All right.
Next time. That's Unscripted.
Thanks for joining us. You can dive into more of Unscripted on Farm Journal's YouTube YouTube channel and listen to it anywhere podcasts are found. I'm Clinton Griffiths.
And I'm Tyne Morgan. From all of us here at Farm Journal, keep it real as you live your life unscripted.
Unscripted is a production of Farm Journal Studios, where no one grows alone.